Hello guys. I'm Krishna and I welcome you all on behalf of TSI chapters we called Vit-Ap University, and we'll take a look at a Python topic today, and it is gonna be very important topic, which is recursion. Recursion. What is recursion? Recursion, basically in computer science, it is a method where the solution to a problem. It basically depends on the solutions to smaller instances of the same problem. For example, like you have to find the factorial of a number. For example, let's say factorial of 4. What we can do is factorial of 4, it is equal to the 4 multiplied by factorial of 3. So look over here. The factorial of 4, it is depending on factorial of 3, and factorial of 3 it is depending on factorial of 2, and so on. So in that case, what we can do, we can use recursion. Recursion recursion it is a method which calls itself again and again for a certain number of times, and most of the times what people do, like the learners, what they do, they make their loops like that. Their code will run up to infinite times, so it is not very convenient and it will take up your system memory, and yeah, so it will utilize your RAM, and you will lose performance as well as you will get the unexpected results. So for recursion, you actually need three things, which is base case. And what is this base case? Base case, it is a recursive function that must have a terminating condition at which the function will stop calling itself. Like for example, let's look at that example which I was discussing, which was finding a factorial. So the base condition, it is like factorial of 0, it is 1. So whenever our code it gets 0, or whenever our function it gets 0, then we should be able to stop our loop. So in that case, factorial of 0 is 1. So what our code will return, it will return 1. And the second part is recursive call. The recursive function will recursively invoke itself on a smaller version of problem. Yeah, so we need to be careful while writing this step, as it is important to correctly figure out what your smaller problem is, on whose solution the original problem's solution depends. Like in our case, I was trying to find the factorial of 4. So it is depending on factorial of 3, like the number minus 1. Factorial of number minus 1. So factorial of 4, it is depending on factorial of 3, and factorial of 3 is depending on factorial of 2, and so on. And the third part is small calculation. Thus, generally, we perform a small calculation step in each recursive call. Like in this factorial one, I am multiplying. So it is calculation, very small calculation. 4, it is multiplied by factorial of 3. So it is small calculation. We can perform this calculation step before or step after the recursive call, depending upon the nature of problem. So in this factorial one, we have to multiply it after calling it, after calling this recursion. So yeah, let's look at an example. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just make sure you know this thing very clearly. So I'll start with the example of this factorial only. So let's say I'm defining a method fact, and it has a number n. And what we do, first of all, what we need a base condition. So in our case, it is 0. So if n equal to 0, then return 1. Oops, it is double equal, not single equal. If n is equal to 0, then return 1. Otherwise, what it will do, it will call n into, it will return, and it is multiplied by factorial of n minus 1. So what is happening over here? I am calling this factorial, and I am passing this number. So I said there are three parts to this recursion problem. Base case. Base case, it is when n is equal to 0. So what we are doing, we are returning 1 whenever n is equal to 0. And then the other second part, it is recursive call. Look over here, I am calling this recursive function, and the condition is n minus 1 because we have to multiply n by the number minus 1, factorial of number minus 1, factorial of 4 minus 1, or factorial of 3 minus 1. And the small calculation, it is happening over here. Look, I am multiplying it. I am first calling. What will happen? First it will calculate the factorial of 3, then it will multiply it by 4. So I am multiplying factorial of 3 by 4. So it is the small calculation. And if we run our code, and let's say I am printing out factorial of 4. So you can see it is returning 24. So I have a similar problem for you guys. Okay, so what I am doing, I am defining a function, let's say test, and it has two parameters, which is I and j. So what this test do, if I equal to 0, then what it does, it returns j. And otherwise, what it does, it calls this function again. It returns test of I minus 1 and j minus 1. And let's call a function. So print test, and let's say I'm passing two values, which is 4 and 7. So look at this code very carefully. So what is our base condition in this case? It is when I is equal to 0, then return j. And in this function we are not performing any calculation. Third part, it is optional, but yeah. And recursive, how is recursion being called? Sorry, we are doing some problem, which is I minus 1 and j minus 1. It is calculation. We are doing this calculation, and what is happening, we are calling this function again and again using this else condition, which returns test of I minus 1 as well as j minus 1. So you try to figure out what should be the output of this following code. Like I explained you pretty much everything about this recursion. So you try to figure out what should be the output of this following code. It is not very difficult. It is very basic problem. Yeah, so you have 5 seconds to pause the video and post your answer in the comment section. Okay, if we try to run this code, it is returning out 3. Why is it returning 3? First of all, it will call test function, and our Python interpreter, it will check if I is equal to 0. Look over here, the value of I, it is equal to 4. So it will go to else condition. What else condition does? It uses recursion. So the value of I, it will be reduced to 3, and value of j, it will be reduced to 6, and it will go on until the value of I is equal to 0. So when the value of I is equal to 0, the value of j is obviously gonna be 3. So that's why over here it is returning 3, as we are returning j and the value of j is 3 when the value of I is 0. So that's why our code is returning 3. I hope it is clear to you guys. It is very important topic, and you should look at it very carefully. It is useful in future programming competitions as well as placement tests. And yeah, So if you still have any doubt, you can just rewind the video, take another look at it. You can also post your answer in the comment section if you still face any difficulty or doubt, or do you have any suggestion for us. And yeah, till then, bye bye. See you guys in our next video. Thank you.